Now, for those who work at these institutions, I really don't want to hear what it is you feel is wrong and how you're being wrong. Honestly, because I really don't understand what you thought was going to happen or what they fooled you into believing. And then I think you should ask yourself, am I in this profession to teach and to make a difference with my own people? Or am I in it just because I like it and this is what folks said I could do? Because a lot of folks are teaching who shouldn't be teaching, in my opinion. So, and then a lot of us allow ourselves to be used as tokens, and we allow ourselves to be used to perpetuate the myth of white supremacy. So we have to remember that these institutions were created to assist in the colonization and the destruction of the native people here in the United States. For example, when you read Ebony and Ivory, what Mr. Wilder does, or I should say Dr. Wilder does, is he gives you receipts. He names slave ships. He names native tribes that were targeted in order to raise revenue to create institutions like Harvard University and Yale. One of the interesting things that I found fascinating was the whole creation of Dartmouth. And that started in the Caribbean by Methodist preachers who said, look, if we're going to get a foothold in this continent, then we got to do something with these native people. So what they decided to do was to create theological seminaries, which is the beginning of Princeton and Harvard and Dartmouth. And specifically with Dartmouth, the goal was to spread Christianity to the natives and then educate them to be good Methodist preachers so that then they would go back to the village and evangelize to them and basically help the colonists. So from their very beginning, and especially these institutions that were founded as native serving institutions like Hampton and Dartmouth, the goal was, and the plan was, to select certain natives, give them and teach them the narrative that you wanted them to then take back to their own people and use their own people to change their minds, to program their minds to become and to become like the white folks coming here from England, and to just replicate it over and over and over again. These universities that we now call the elite places, the Ivy, were created for what the Europeans call the merchant class, which is not even nobility or high class, if you want to call it that. They were merchants, blue collar workers. And guess how they made their living? Selling people. So the first building on Harvard's campus, the first building on Yale's campus, the first building at Georgetown, the first building at North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, were made as the result of revenue from the slave trade, so that their sons and daughters could go and then be educated, and they tried to repeat and tried to make themselves on the same level as the aristocracy in Britain. So another way of saying that is, here you got a little above trash people who are rejected in their homeland, who come over here and try to remake themselves into something elite. And I think for a lot of reasons, that's why I believe the racism in the United States is really unique, because what you have is the majority of the people who came underneath leaders like William Penn and others. They were not necessarily the upper echelon of Great Britain. They were, we know some of them were prisoners. Some of them had been abused by the aristocracy in Europe. And they came over here and then they tried to reinvent themselves by creating these institutions because they came over here to make money. They made money and then they tried to turn themselves into something that was better than everybody. And so what you have, however I give it to them, is that the whole place is built on a systematic subjugation of other people. Now, Black Lives Matter and marching through the street, all of that is real good and nice. But what do you do to change a country that has this kind of foundation in its educational, religious, and governmental structure? Really, what you have to do, you can't just trash the police, you got to trash the whole thing. So I guess I'm saying all of that to say that when we have institutions, although most HBCUs are founded by white folks who didn't want to go to school with us, almost all of them became something different. And they became something different because they had teachers and people who really wanted to change the lives of the people who had been misused and abused and miseducated who were here. And so I would much rather work with those institutions, even though many of them are fighting their own mimicry of these white institutions. I have found that despite the problems and the effort to be just like the white folks' schools, there are more opportunities to make real structural changes in these places than there are in the quote unquote Ivy League. The other thing I found is that the students who attend these HBCUs and then go on to participate in the Ivy Tower or Ivory Tower, whichever one you want to call it, what they discover is this myth of exceptionalism because of the name of the institution is just that, a myth. And that actually these students, the rich ones with the parents, these professors, a lot of them ain't real smart at all. And so they're like, well, what was it that I was looking for? Well, what they find out is they want you to replicate them, to become a token so that then you can continue the goal of the founders of Dartmouth and Yale. You become the evangelist to your own people, and therefore you perpetuate the white supremacy and your sense of inferiority because you went to the white folks' school. And the thing about it is they had a systemized plan to do this, because once you look at Dr. Wilder's book, you'll find out that the University of North Carolina, for example, was intended to be the Yale of the South. You will also find, which I'm sure many of you already know, is that these planters and these merchants, their students who went to these schools took their slaves with them. We all know about Georgetown and the fact that they use revenue from the slaves who worked on the university campus for the students in order to save themselves in financial hardship. So my question always has been, why would I go to school there? Because I don't think that I'm going to get anything superior. Your methods may be different. And I've also, come to the conclusion that anybody who goes to school, what you get and how well educated you are depends on you, the student, and not the school per se. You just may have a different foundation or a different methodology, but if you concentrate on that, you're going to be weak in some other area. So you still got to catch up. I just don't think it makes a difference. And I'm not giving them that money if I can help it. And I don't have any sympathy when you work in these spaces and then you want to complain and moan about how racist they are. Well, duh. I don't have time for it. And I don't think you should either. I'm just saying. See you guys next time.